Good morning. Today I have the pleasure of talking with Tony Saunders, a great bassist. He has a great new jazz album out, and he comes from a musical family. Tony, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, man. How you doing, Bob?
I'm doing
Awesome.
good,
I'm,
man.
I'm thankful to be on here with you.
I appreciate it, man. And of course, we have a mutual friend, Nils, who we're going to talk about. His ears are going to be burning, I bet. But Tony, tell me about your dad and his relationship with the Grateful Dead and how he got you into music.
My dad, I guess my dad was and just an outstanding organ player, keyboard player, piano player, and organ player. And I started to notice him when I was probably 8 or 9. He was playing with the Billy Williams Review, and then he came back to San Francisco. This was in Las Vegas. When he came back to San Francisco, he played at this club always, Jack's. Then he met this guy named Nick Gravenitis. And from Nick Gravenitis, he met Danny Cox. They did this movie, Steelyard Blues. And then he met Paul Butterfield. And I remember at 10 years old, I went on a trip with my dad. I was a roadie. The guy's name was Fastback. Was Paul Butterfield's roadie, and I'm in the truck, moving the gear, and just a cool kid. We went to Fresno. Sealand Arena was their first gig, and John Kahn was on bass. It was another. Paul Butterfield was trying to get another the Better Days band, and John Kahn, my dad. I met Amos Garrett, and also Maria Mulder's husband, Jeff Mulder, and then Paul Butterfield. They were all playing together, and it was just like awesome. So we were the headliners. Opening the show was Sons of the Chaplain, unbeknownst to me, right? So I'm this little black kid from the Haight-Ashbury. I got my little cool suit on, and I basically dress like I do now. I wear a shirt like this, a shirt like this, and then some slacks or jeans. So I had on jeans and my shirt. And then so I saw all these long-haired white guys that smoke weed. They came walking in, to play music as the opening act. And I was like, Fastbuck, let's go back to the hotel, man. I don't want to see this. And, I thought it was like a hippie band. And then they started to play Note 1, the Sons of Chaplain. I was like, holy mogoly. I was like, man, this is like, all right. So that was my first show. And so I saw the Sons of Chaplain and Paul Butterfield. I loved them both, and I had only been a Motown kid, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I've been playing piano. I'd been playing piano for like 3 years when I was 10. But I was already in the California Junior Symphony. And so my dad, after Butterfield, when he was doing these sessions with Nick Gravenitis a lot. And so they introduced him to Bill Vitt. And Bill Vitt introduced my dad to Jerry Garcia. And then they started playing at this place called The Matrix. We would go there and like lie on pillows and watch him play, you know what I mean? And I had no idea. The dude was just Jerry to me, Uncle Jerry. And I had no idea of his celebrity. But I did notice that people, like wherever he played, there was a lot of people. And so then my dad, at first it was called Merle Saunders and Friend, and Jerry would just come. And then when they formalized their band, it was called Merle Saunders and Jerry Garcia Band. And then he also, so when I was 14, I switched to playing bass after I watched these. My dad was producing Walter Hawkins. And so I saw this bass player play named Lee Miles, and the other one name was Anthony Davis. After I saw them two play, all I wanted to do was play bass. Wow. So my dad, this is a G-rated thing, so I can't say what my dad called me. But he said, you're the lead piano player in the California Junior Symphony. How are you doing this to me? So what he did to me was what they considered, I could call CPS, Child Protective Services, because they basically, when I went to the studio every day with them Fantasy Studios, they locked me in the vocal booth with a bass and said, practice, let's do it. But 3 years later, he was like going, okay, I made my son so he could play bass with me. You know, I was his pal then. So all this time, my dad was playing with Jerry Garcia. I had no idea about the Grateful Dead or anything. And so my first gig was playing with my dad and Jerry Garcia when I was 17. You know, at a club, I made $300, and of course it was packed. And so, you know, I was like, so I cut a hole in my jeans. You know, I said, I got to fit in. I poured some Clorox on my shirt. I said, hey, man, I don't know what this is, but this is cool stuff. So I was able to mimic the bass player that played with him, John Kahn, because I was there every day. I knew everything he played, but from the piano, right? I interpreted my bass as a piano, you know, because my dad would say, you practicing? And I'm like, yeah, but I wasn't, but I did know what the piano notes were. So I made that. And whatever he played, I could play. Whatever I heard, I could play. And you know, so I got to play with him, my dad, and Jerry. Also with Bill Kreutzmann, the drummer in the Dead, and you know, and that was great. And then so my dad played with him in 3 groups: Merle Saunders, Jerry Garcia. Another one was Reconstruction, and then another one was Legion of Mary. But all the time on Jerry's own, my dad had a group, you know, that he established for me called Aunt Ma. You know, and he made that so that we played every Monday night at this club, right? And gave me something to do. And you know, and like I played Stanley Clarke songs, all kind of other stuff, you know, not like Grateful Dead stuff. And Jerry would come there unannounced, and he would come sit in, you know, no matter what little club we were playing in. You know what I mean? It'd be something like 150 seat place. There was this one place we played all the time on Mondays called the Sand Dunes out by the beach. And, you know, he'd come walking in carrying his own amp and his guitar, come to hang out. You know what I mean? And we played all kind of great Stanley Clarke music, Weather Report music, Mother Lode, and Gino Vanelli, all stuff that he wouldn't play in those groups, you know what I mean? And so it was in a lot of jazz stuff. He loved that my dad was like a jazz aficionado, you know what I mean? And my dad could really play. When you know, my dad, if I were to listen to him then, I wouldn't be in my studio right now at 1 a.m. learning music that, you know, I was a kid. So, you know, I had just discovered girls, you know, you know, because I was a square in high school. You know,
I was too.
I acted like I got a girlfriend, but you know, I didn't. I did have a girlfriend at 14, but you know, all we did was hold hands. You know what I mean? We didn't do anything. I think I kissed her maybe 3 or 4 times the whole relationship. And then, but you know, being around the Grateful Dead and Jerry Garcia, there are tons of girls. You know, my oldest kid is from a relationship from that. And the cool thing about that, me and her, we're still friends. You know what I mean? Yep. After a couple years, you know, I went to Europe and I was like, I came back and I was talking to her. I was like, you know what? We got to have a talk. Because there's like all these women all over the world, and there's so many beautiful women. And, you know, you were my first girlfriend. I thought that I would be with you forever, but that's not going to happen. And, you know, so it was being around the Grateful Dead was something. Do you know the people that I met? I met the people in the band. Rick Danko was a friend.
Yeah.
You know, my first sessions, I got to be around Keith and Donna, because at that time Keith Gauchow was playing in the keyboards, and then the Grateful Dead's next keyboard player, Brent. Me and him were like this. You know what I mean? Because then my dad worked on the Twilight Zone. And Phil Lesh let me play the bass because he couldn't be there like every day and do the requirements of a TV show. So my dad hired me as assistant. And so Jerry was there, you know, Bob Weir. And, you know, so for the Motown kid, you know, it's really funny because I got the reverse career. I never played like in clubs and top 40 bands till like in my 30s, late 30s. Right? Because I toured with all these bands when I was in my 20s and 30s with all these superstar people. And then reality came home when I was about 35. when I remember showing up at a gig and they said, Tony, where's your gig? Where's your rig, rather? And I'm like, don't y'all have backline? And they're like, dude, no, this is reality. You have to bring your amp to the gig yourself, unload it, set it up, and then we play 3 sets or 4, whatever's necessary. So, I had reverse indication. I did play a couple of little gigs, while I'm not saying I didn't play any, but that was for the most part, I played a lot of gigs. I was in one group when I was young that we opened up for my dad, was Sweet Meat. The guitar player was Chris Hayes, who was in Huey Lewis, who wrote tons of songs in Huey Lewis and retired from Huey Lewis after touring for 25 years. His sister was the piano player. She wrote tunes for Billy Idol and also wrote when Bonnie Raitt did that comeback album, when she had all those hits. Give me some. She wrote Nick of Time. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then his brother, the brother was on drums, Kevin. He played with Robert Cray for 12 years or so. So this is the little house band that we had, that his mother, Hayes' mother, on Friday nights, we were there playing music. We weren't running the streets, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And then, so between that and being around the Grateful Dead, it was like, an auspicious awakening to the music business, and then my dad being around that scene, it gave me the Black perspective as well as the white perspective. So, I've been in the Hells Angels clubhouse, as well as I've been at the Black Panthers clubhouse. You know what I mean? There's not too many Black people can say that.
You mentioned the Matrix, and that's the club that Marty Balin of the Jefferson Airplane founded. Yep. And that was, for people that don't know, the Matrix was pretty much the club to get into and go to during that period. And that's when San Francisco really was the music scene in the 60s and the early 70s, when, you had everybody coming out of here, and everybody wanted to play here too.
It was incredible, man. It was incredible. So we lived on Page and Ashbury. So I would go down there to the park every Saturday and watch all those groups play. I don't even know who I saw. I probably saw Hendrix play. You know what I mean? Yep. But what's really funny is, so I met the drummer that played with my dad, played with Hot Tuna. And so I got to rehearse in the Airplane House when they were out on tour with my band. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then so I became good friends with Jack and Yorma. I'll be at their sessions. I would be there all the time with them. And Jack gave me some of my first gear. You know what I mean? So I'm around Jack Cassidy, like hanging out. You know what I mean? Yeah. One of my things that happened a couple years ago, I got to play a duo with him of the song Imagine with 2 basses, me and him playing. It was like the teacher meets the student. Finally, they hooked back up, and it's the teacher's beaming and the students beaming. And the first time he really saw me play was at a NAMM show, and he went, damn, Tony. And he went and gave me one of his signature basses. He just grabbed one off the rack, and he says, I need this to give it to Tony Saunders. And it's like, I don't even play it. I just have it sitting in the closet, so I look at it every once in a while. But, those kind of things happening to me, being around Phil Lesh and, these guys, they were super famous. You know what I mean? Yeah. And, I went to Winterland. I was at Winterland. I saw the last days of the band. I saw in the 70s, the last concerts of the Grateful Dead, when they said that they were going to stop in the early 70s, which they didn't. But, I saw a lot of stuff. And I got to play with a lot of people because of my dad's notoriety with them. It was bigger than life. I remember the wall of speakers, everything. You know what I mean? And then when there's a thing on YouTube, because I played with Keystone Revisited, which was kind of a tribute to my dad and Jerry. And then they were, the roadie, Steve Parrish, who was Garcia's roadie, he told me about my first gig I played. They were all, because I was just going to the gig, and my dad didn't tell me I was going to play the whole gig, right? I would usually sit in for the last gig, the last couple of songs. John Conn would let me sit in, because he taught me first. You know what I mean? Him and the guy, this other guy, I can't remember his name, but John Conn spent time with me and showed me, like, he told me to go listen to James Jamerson, and then, then listen to whoever you want. So I was listening to James Jamerson and Stanley Clarke, Alphonso Johnson. Those are the guys who I listened to, who I kind of etched myself out of. But then, so we're on the way to a gig in Katati at the end of the beginning, and my dad goes, "So you think you're ready?" Oh, and then my dad, who was also odd, my dad said, "Oh yeah, bring your bass, son, tonight." And I was like, "I could just play John's." He said, "Nah, bring your bass." So halfway there, he says, "Hey, do you think you can handle the whole gig?" I said, "Of course." And then he says, "Because John's not here tonight." And I went, holy, I definitely probably peed on myself. And then, so we get there, and the roadie told me, Steve Parrish told me, said, we were all nervous because we didn't know how you would do, Tony. But I knew everything because I watched him every night. I could hum his bass lines. I idolized him so much. I could stand like him. I could hold a cigarette in my mouth like he used to stand. I could do everything just like him. And they couldn't believe it after they heard the first set. They were all, at first they were nervous, and then they were all, "Oh, this is awesome. Tony's good. We don't need to get any more subs." He gave me I had the top of the line equipment. I didn't even know it. I got a Macintosh 2300 amp as my preamp, and then a Furman equalizer. I was like, it was like, oh my God, equipment. And, the rest is history.
That's what I was going to get into, was like I was going to throw a few bass players out there, and I wanted your opinion. And we're going to talk about your new album coming up too. But you mentioned, who are some of your other influences? I'm going to throw a bass player out that I really admire, Tyrone Porter of the Doobie Brothers. Have you ever had any interaction with Tyrone?
We had the same girlfriend.
No,
but he had her first. He had her first, and then some years passed, and then I had her. Franja Faye Feldstein. We both had her as a girlfriend, but solid, pocket. Taught me the idea of playing a song. When I listened to him, I learned that a song could have parts, and although you didn't have to be flashy, the bass line was so important to the song. Yep. As in Long Train Running, the bass kind of starts that song, and several of the Doobie songs. I did get to play with Tommy Johnson in my lifetime. He played with my dad, and we, for about a year, we played together a lot. And what a bass player, as far as being solid, and also he's a lyrical bass player. Absolutely. But not lyrical. You know what I mean? But he plays the part, and he locks that groove in, man. He made those songs swing in the Doobie Brothers. You know what I mean? They're obviously one of my favorite groups. I have so many favorite groups, but I listen to so much music. It didn't really matter the style. As long as you played good and consistent, there was a purpose, and especially if you were in the group for a long time. And then being the only black guy, so him and the guy from Crosby, Stills and Nash, that stuck out to me. Say, why are these black guys in that group and everybody else is white? And say, they need him to hold it together. So, and Tyrone definitely held it together. The bass player in Crosby, Stills and Nash did the same thing.
Well, I got one for you, and this is a complete 360 because he played his bass like a lead guitar. John Entwistle of The Who. I mean, to me, they called him Thunderfingers, and that guy, if you just watch John play, you're just like, how the hell does he do that? Because you had the four bombastic guys in The Who, everybody claiming, you had Keith Moon as a story unto itself, but you had Townsend and Daltrey, everybody vying. But what are your impressions of John Entwistle and the way he played?
I got to see him play once, about 2 years, about a year before he passed. And he put in my mind that I could play bass, another way. You know what I mean? Besides the obvious people like Stanley Clarke and all that stuff, but he put it because I'm coming from his perspective. I'm a rock guy that people told me I play funky. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I wouldn't get the gig because people say I play too funky. And I'd be like, why? I could play this rock stuff. And they go, no, you're like a funk guy. I'm going like, what's funk? And then Entwistle, he had such, some of his songs he wrote are epic. You know what I mean? Some of the songs that he wrote are just epic. And he gave me the intuition that, I could do more with the bass. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There was a home for me. Even though I play a different style, it gave me that initiative to go, okay, this guy is making the bass like be, oh my God. People are just like, that stuff that they played was like epic. The Who are like, they're like, you have to listen to it. Yeah, I went through that was like the 11th and 12th grade for me. I was a Who fanatic. And, I didn't realize how much of his stuff, it was really funny. So I'd be playing stuff and then I'd just recall something he did. And I'd added it to my theme to play on somebody's record or whatever. And, people wouldn't know it, but I'd have recalled something that he did that was just really awesome.
That's what, like, people ask me what changed your mind about music, and I said, I'll be honest with you, when I bought Led Zeppelin 4 and I dropped the needle on when the levee breaks, I just went, what the blank is this? And it just it exploded. I got it. I figured it out, because there's a certain mechanics to music that a lot of people don't understand what goes into a song, and like how you would come up with writing a song, or Nils comes up with writing it, gets a riff, and all of a sudden the song builds on it. But I understood what they were trying to do. And then listening to you guys play, it's the same thing. I get it. I can feel the groove when you guys are on stage playing. It's just, there's something magical about it that you won't even look at Nils and you guys know where you're going. You're running your bass lines and Nils is doing a lead, and then all of a sudden it clicks together, and it's like, it's magic. There's you can't explain it to people.
Yeah, and he's like Nils is a dominant guitar player. You know what I mean? When I say dominant, I mean this guy, he knows exactly what he's gonna do.
Yep.
I played with a lot of people. Not that many people know what they're gonna do for the show. You know what I mean?
Yep.
They'll wing it. But this guy I will say this, man, he's disciplined as heck. You know what I mean? He's made me be more disciplined. You know what I mean? I would say I owe my career upgrade, which I believe this last record got me a career upgrade, because I know what to do now. You know what I mean? And it's from watching him and the other producer on the CD, Gail Johnson. Between Nils and Gail, I know what to do. Because Gail tells me she dusted off the cobwebs on me. Nils says he made me play.
Well,
you know what I mean?
That's going to lead me into your new CD on the indie label. It's 6 weeks at #1. It's called Sexy Something. And congratulations on that. That is awesome. You and Nils are battling 1 and 1A with the new CDs out.
Oh, yes, it's real cool. His CD is #1. He deserves being #1. My CD is #2, and then I think on the indie chart I'm #1 by myself. But hey, to be #2 to him, what could I say? He's an awesome soul. He's an awesome soul, and that's what you want to be around. When I remember one day I was leaving his house, about 10 o'clock at night, and we couldn't figure out why I couldn't get in my car, and it was because the little key thing didn't work. So Nils got a battery for me, fixed it, and said, "Okay, now you can go." But I was stuck in his driveway.
How much beer did you have to bring him for that?
No, I didn't have to bring him much. Couple bottles of wine.
There you go. Yeah, we live in the wine country, or near the wine country, so we've got our pick and choose of what we want to drink up here.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your album. How did you come up with the title, and how did you come up with the plan for this album? I mean, what was the thought process? What did you want to do?
Okay, so my last album, all my albums on that label have been good. The first 2 albums, though, were half of it was singing and half of it was music, instrumental music, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had some great singers. I got to Lifetime Dream. Bill Chaplin sang on one of my songs.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So that comes from when I was 10 years old. So you know what I'm saying? That story that I told you earlier, by seeing him at 10 years old. So Bill Vitt had a session that he was going to use him on. I was in Florida. And Bill Vitt, he says, "Well, Tony, I wish you were here because Bill Chaplin's going to be here tomorrow. I said, I'm there. I'll be there. You know, he didn't pay me anything for playing on his record or anything. I just wanted to be around Bill Chaplin. Then I got to meet him. We hung, and then he got him to sing on my album. So I've had all these Grammy winners singing on my first 2 albums. Tony Lindsay from Santana, Bill Chaplin, and Howard Hewitt. You know, all of these guys have, like, they got Grammys, you know. But my cousin came to the gig. My cousin said, my cousin Kenneth Pratt said, Tony, you know, what you're doing is good with these singers and everything, but really this show is about you. You know what I mean? So you really don't need that. I said, what do you mean? He said, you know, I enjoyed myself. The show was good, but you need to make the show about you. So my album before this last one was called Uptown Jazz, and that one only had 1 singing song. And then this new album, there's 1 singing song. It's not even a singing song. There's 1 song with backgrounds on it, or 2 songs with backgrounds on it. And I made the show about me. So then I figured, what can I be? How can I prepare myself? I said, well, I like this sexy something vibe. You know what I mean? And I just like, it's like just a cool attitude. It's nothing personal or to do anything about sexy. You know what I mean? Because, you know, I'm as far from sexy as you can imagine. But I do like sexy women, right? So the first song that I wrote for the album was called Sexy Something. And I wrote that and I was playing that in clubs, you know, for a while, working it out. And then I got the idea, I said, you know what? I need a song that's gonna bring recognition to me. That's a cover song that I could play and I could give it away because I don't own the publishing. So who cares? You know, give it away. Who cares? You know what I mean? So I got the song. So after I played Sexy Something for about 6 months before I got serious about making a record. I was playing in all the bands that I play in. I started off with sex. I'd always have Sexy Something in the set. And then I said, I want to record Rock Steady. So one of my play brothers, Magic, is the bass player in the Whispers. And the Whispers did the Rock Steady, Steady Rocking All Night Long. I said, that's going to be my song. That's going to be my song. And I've known the Whispers since I was 18. In fact, in my hallway, I have a picture that they signed to my mom. You know what I mean? Because they knew my mom. And, you know, and my mom's husband, after my dad, was Jimmy B, who was helped them with so many career paths. You know what I mean? Yep. So I said, that song is going to do wonders for me. And one of my other cousins, Vivian Chu, she told me, she said, yeah, Tony, you need to release a single and then, you know, let that set the path for your album. So Rock Steady came out. I went to Atlanta. My daughter lives in Atlanta. So, you know, I like Atlanta anyway. So Magic lived in Atlanta. I went there, recorded Rock Steady, you know, and it was an awesome track. Put it out, and then I started working on the album. And then I met Niels shortly after that. And then I was already kind of working with Gail Johnson. She had hired me on a couple gigs. And she's a musical director for Norman Brown, but she had hired me on an awesome gig where I got to work with Paul Jackson Jr., Jesse J, Jeff Albert, you know, Sinbad. You know, it was just like a cool gig. I got to play in Hollywood and all these A-listers were playing. And then I started to get my record together in LA. After I fooled around with Niels, I was like, hey, Niels, could you produce me? And he was like, yeah. And so Niels doesn't even know this.
You will now.
Chasing the Dreams, which is the next single off my album, right? I had part of it put together, right? But then the rest of it, he says, what's the rest of it go like? And I was like, oh, it goes like this. I just put it together right there. You know what I mean? It's an awesome song. You know, and it's an awesome song. I had the other song together after George, as it was a tribute to George Duke, and he got Jeff Lorber to play on it, which was like awesome. And Gail played piano. No, Jeff Lorber played piano, and so the song started out slow, and then it went fast, right? And so, but we made it into two separate songs. But Jeff Lorber is just like killing on the whole song. His parts were so good. When I drove back to San Francisco from Neil's house after finishing that session, I just listened to Jeff Lorber the whole way for 6 hours. Nothing else but his piano for 6 hours. Because
Wow.
it was that awesome to me. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I had Niels make me a copy. I said, just turn up the piano. That's all I want to hear. And it was like awesome. So that song I had together. After George, I wrote it like right there with Niels going, okay, where's the next part go? So it goes right here. You know, but I was like, I made it up right in his studio as we were doing it. And it's one of the great songs on my record. But I couldn't tell Niels that I wasn't prepared, right? He says, well, what's the other song go like? I was like, oh, it goes like this. I was like, oh, yeah. And I made it up in his room. And it's an awesome song. It's After George. You know what I mean? But I definitely made it up right there. And he's going like, what's the other song go like? I'm going like, oh, it goes like this. And we got Jeff Ryan on it and Gail and Niels. And Niels played a really cool melody. You know, he's good. And he structured it. He made it have structure. And it's one of my songs that really has a lot of structure to it. And, you know, not that they all don't, but this one does. It highlights me playing bass, highlights him playing guitar. And it sounds like a Pacific Coast Highway kind of song where he's just like frolicking through a melody.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the song. But then it goes here and there's the bass part. And then it goes back to the frolicking. And then there's cool sections, you know, where it goes to cool section. Then you got the sax in there. Then we all play a melody together. You know, it should have been the first song, but Rocksteady was the first song, and it served its purpose. Rocksteady came out on the chart in September. We didn't release another single till March, you know, when the album was finished, March of this year.
That's
So,
yeah. We were going to come to your CD launch party up at the Blue Note in Napa, and of course
right.
we all know what happened. And we'll be there in January when you get it out again. Hopefully,
Okay.
we'll be able to travel. We will by then, but you know, that's the thing about music. If you just close your eyes or put your headphones on or whatever, let the music take you where you want to go. Listen to, like you were saying, you know, you pick out your bass part, you pick out the drums, whatever you want to listen to, just let the music. And I think that's what most musicians want you to do, is let the music take you in any direction you want to go and put you in a better place. Because music, you know, music is one of the greatest things we've ever had in this world, you know, because it speaks to everybody. Everybody can relate to a song. It doesn't matter what song it is, or whether it's rap, rock, hip hop, jazz, blues. Everybody can relate to something.
Right, man. It fills you with a lot, man.
Yeah,
You know,
watching you and Nils at Yoshi's in Oakland, just watching you guys play was just fun for me, because we were in the front row. Nils got us in the front, and I'm just watching you guys, and you guys are just playing, you know, in sync with one another, knowing which way each one is going to go. And you guys look like you were having so much fun up there.
Oh yeah, man. It's like there's nothing like it. Hey, being on stage, there's nothing like it. You know, I can do, if I could do that every day, I could do it every day. You know, I mean, I do a Wednesday hour and a half on Facebook Live, you know, just so I could play in front of people and talk to people, you know what I mean? And it's really, really a fun thing to do. But there's no better feeling for me. I mean, I play with some great people, but there's just no better feeling, you know, where you give your all and then the people like it. You know what I mean? There's no better feeling than that.
Yeah, I had the great fortune in '85, New Year's Eve '84. A buddy of mine knew the guys in the band Night Ranger, and I was in Southern California. We flew up for the gig at the Cow Palace, and I got to see the show from the stage, which many people can't do. And like you said, there's not, even though you're not playing, just you get the vibe, you get the feel. There's not, you can't explain it. It's just, there's something. It's the greatest rush you can feel, you know, because, you know, the lights
Right.
come on and boom, there's, you know, 20,000 people screaming at you. And if I could be anything in life besides the third baseman for the Red Sox, I would have been either a guitarist or a drummer. You know, I think it would. I wish I could have played, but it's just a lot of fun. And go ahead.
You know that guy in Night Ranger. What's the bass player's name?
Jack Blades.
Yeah, Jack Blades. Okay, so we're the same age. So this will trip you out. When Jack Blades was coming up, me and him we were the funk guys. You know what I mean? We were the funk guys. I mean, he could play the thumb stuff really well. You know what I mean? He could play the funky stuff. He was really good at it. And he was in a bunch of funk bands. And then when he got in Night Ranger, I was going like, whoa, because it was the farthest thing that I ever thought he would be doing.
It's crazy how you think, you think you're going to go one way, like with Jack Blades, and all of a sudden you're doing something completely opposite. And, you got the girls, you got the fame, and you got the money, and things change. But you've basically, from just talking to you and listening to your music, you've stayed, you made your dad proud. You stayed the course of what you wanted to play and what you wanted to do.
Yeah. There's definitely, I mean, I've had bumps in the road, but my dad was always there. He gave me jobs along the way. I think that what I was most proud of is after he left, after Jerry Garcia, and although they did work on other projects, but after, in the late 70s, when he was on his own, when he was able to fill up, 1,500 seats, that I knew he was happy. I remember the first time when we were at a gig in Rochester, New York, and the first time we drove up and there was a line outside. The look on his face was like, a son knows it when his dad's happy. You know what I mean? And, and I was happy that I was able to be with him on some of his very high notes and help him through some of his low notes. But he always pushed me to do better. And yeah, I learned how to do production from him. I'm just a little faster because I'm the next generation. You know what I mean? I think his best record was music he finally, because I was always going, Dad, let me produce you. I know you. I know I can produce you. And, he's going like, yeah, right. And then finally he said, son, I want you to produce me. And we did 4 songs before he had a stroke. You know what I mean? But those 4 songs are like, they were awesome. They were headed in another direction. It was me, because he would steal from me anyway. You know what I mean? He would go like, yeah, what was that part that you played on that? And there's a couple songs that he would play, and he had them in his show when I wasn't playing with him that were my songs. And the people thought they were his songs. I said, no, I wrote that. And he goes, oh, okay. You know what I mean? My dad doesn't write like that. My dad, listen to it. It really sounds like a Herbie Hancock kind of part. And then that's what I write like. You know what I mean? And but it's flattering. But those 4 songs, man, they were so good. We had Mavis Staples sing on one song. It was just like awesome. And it was a perfect blend of me and him. And it was like I was the producer. So it was like I got the final say. Although I wish he wouldn't have had the stroke. Because I know he would like to play with me now. If he was still here, because I could play now. And now I'm ready to compete with him. You know what I mean? And he's got me in here at 1 a.m. This song that he used to sit me to the side on. He said this song called Holy Land by Cedar Walton. It's awesome. The piano part is just like ridiculous. You know what I mean? But I'm learning the piano part now. You know what I mean? Because I'm going to put it in my next record, but I'm going to play it for like a year so I have it really down, right? But he would say, son, you sit out this one. I'm going to play organ bass on this. Check it out. And then he would just go like, he would be like killing the organ. You know what I mean? And, and now he's got me here from heaven, still practicing. You know what I mean? I'm learning this song. I've learned about a third of it. I learned some of the piano part. I've learned the melody. That's like super hard for bass, super hard. Now I'm going to learn the bass solo, because the first thing that happens after they play the head is the bass solo, and he's playing over the changes, and it might as well be a John Coltrane song. It's that hard, You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is also another thing I do. I play a lot of John Coltrane stuff. I learned the stuff that Jocko learned. When my friend's kid, Lily Burns, I used to go to baseball game with her when she was like 11, and now she's a bass player, and now she does other things too besides play music. But when her father, Dave Burns, told me that she could play Donna Lee, I said, man, I got to learn that now. I can't let Lily, outplay me on bass. And, and so I learned it. I learned Donna Lee. And, I learned a couple of other John Coltrane, Jocko songs. And it's just been, back then I wouldn't do it because I said everybody does that. Man, I wish I would have learned that back then because it's really interesting learning it.
Your dad is looking down on you, and he's probably having a beer with John Bonham right now, and he's going, "That's my kid," and Bonzo's going, "Yeah, well, that's my kid." They're probably comparing who's who, because Jason is a great drummer in his own right, and
oh yeah, he's awesome, man.
Oh man, we saw, my wife and I saw the reunion concert in '07 that they did, and I closed my eyes, and she's looking at me, and I said, "It sounds just like Bonzo. These kids sounds exactly like his dad," which Bonzo was hard to there was only one John Bonham, and playing music, everybody has their own little niche in their own way of playing, and you've developed yours probably more than through your dad. You got a lot of influence from him. Is he your biggest influence?
I give it up. I'm cool. I'm cool with knowing that my music comes from him. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. I got the same demeanor as him. I'm very mellow. I'm always giving. I'm always donating my time and stuff. The only thing that I probably did different than him, for 5 years I coached varsity football at the local high school. When I lived in Mill Valley, I coached at Tam High. I coached there for 4 years and 1 year at San Rafael High. And then not only did I coach the football team, I coached the Pop Warner. I was the athletic director for Pop Warner. So I had the same system coming up through Pop Warner to feed the high school. And we developed a team that was 0-10 to, respectable. And I was a good football coach. That's the only thing different. I coached varsity football, freshman basketball. I even think 1 year I coached girls softball. You know what I mean? So what that 5 years was like, I was good enough in high school. I really didn't go to high school. But so when I coached, I had to be there every day. So that was my penance for doing that, for not really going to high school every day.
Where did you obviously got great discipline. Did you get that from your dad in your practice, and you're just gonna keep playing the same song till I get the damn thing right, until I get the right groove? And did you get the discipline from your dad?
From that, and I got it from my dad and watching the guys in LA. A lot of those guys, a lot of those great guys are like Nathan East, who is like one of the richest bass players and most recorded bass players ever. I got like him, Nathan East, Freddie Washington. These guys are like some of the most recorded cats. So I saw good all the time. So I had to, right off the bat, I had to be good. And I think one of the gospel gigs I did, the drummer was also a great bass player, Joel Smith. So I always had to be better than that, no matter what. You know what I mean? And so I played on Neil Sean's record, and Alphonso Johnson was playing bass. And I finally got to meet him. I liked him since I was a kid, and he came up and he sat right next to me, and we were having a man talk. And he talked to me, he said, "Tony," he said, "it's in your hands. That's where your sound comes from." And I never thought about that, And I was like, "Well, what do you set the numbers on your amp to?" It doesn't really matter. I get the same sound because of my hands. And he also told me that not everybody's going to be famous because there's only so many spots for being famous. So you really have to really be good. So seeing the discipline in this guy who had been famous since he was 15 or 16 when he first played on Chuck Mangione's record, and with the Billy Cobham George Duke band, this guy was studious, and he taught at USC. You know what I mean? He's super studious. Everybody that I met that was serious was super studious. So it not only did my dad put it in me, but other people that were really successful put it in me. Once, so I had my weed smoking days, but all that stuff was put behind me in 1983 when my daughter was born. It's like, I'm cool with it. You know what I mean? I don't need drugs. Drugs, I worked with David Crosby when he was doing all of that stuff, and I probably tried more than I probably should have, but I survived it. And in the middle of a tour, I stopped. I said, I don't want to, man, I can't do this. Because this is when Yes came out with that Owner of a Lonely Heart. You know what I mean? That came out in the middle of a tour, and all I wanted to do was like, I wanted my music to be that precise. You know what I mean? I would listen to that. I said, oh man, I got to be like that. And so from then on, I start, and that's what Crosby liked about me at that time was I was bringing it. I had a bass solo. I was young. And that was when he was doing crazy things. Sometimes he left the stage, and I was the only one up there. You know what I mean? They'll go like bass solo. I'm like, huh? You know what I mean? And so I learned, and then I had to get better. You know what I mean? There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I mean, and then when I would play people that were lame, after a while I get bored. Money wouldn't mean anything to me. I remember I was playing in a cover band. They said I was asleep playing because it was so boring. You know what I mean? Playing cover songs, I was like, oh man. They said that I was playing the bass with my eyes closed, and that I knew the set so good that I could just get through it. You know what I mean? And I knew that wasn't for me. I got fired from that band, and then I started my solo career. That was 11 years ago.
There you
know
go.
what I mean?
And the rest is history.
Then I never went back. And those my dad and seeing just people great all around me, that made me have the discipline, because I know, like an athlete, remember that I wanted to be a football player. I said I didn't grow. You know what I mean? I'm only 5'10", but I wanted to be an NFL player. But so I had discipline to get good at football and the same discipline to get good at music. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and you could ask, at my house right now, I spend 8-9 hours in here every day. You know what I mean? I spend 8-9 hours in this room that we're talking from. I'm here 8-9 hours, and nobody makes me be in there. You know what I mean? But you got to have that discipline at some point, because everybody that's real, no matter how good you are, there's still somebody better. You know what
Absolutely.
I mean?
There's somebody who have to take your job.
You have to be open. And now I'm 60. So I'll be 65. But there's like bass players 20 years old that are whooping the bass. You know what I mean? So I got to listen to them and listen to all the generations of bass players, and still get my little niche where I'm cool. You know what I mean? So hopefully I'm defining a place where I can have a niche, and I love it. There's nothing else I'd rather do. So I'm inspired to put in the time. And what I learned about being in LA and in New York, my cousin is the MD for Dancing with the Stars, and he's a great arranger. Before that, he did Showtime at the Apollo and American Idol, because he's disciplined. I knew when we were like, I was 12, he was 9. We're walking down the street in New York, and he goes, Tony, did you just hear that? I was like, what? He said the bus was in B flat. I was like, oh man, you're that good. And so it's like, I've been around these kind of people all my life. When I was 21, I played with Dave Liebman, right? I thought I was good. I played with Dave Liebman and Pee Wee Ellis. They came out west to have a band. We made a couple of records on A&M. Pee Wee's, I forget what label Pee Wee was on, but that was the same Pee Wee from James Brown Band. Hey, Pee Wee, so I got to work with him. But Dave Liebman is like a virtuoso. He's like a master sax player, a no BS sax player. You know what I mean? He like taught Dave Sanborn and Michael Brecker. Those You know, so he said, so, you know, I'm playing, I'm thinking I'm cool. I'm 21 years old, just had a kid. I think I'm the mess, you know, I got a girlfriend, you know, yeah. And so he goes, yeah, you're all right, you know, for the West Coast, you know, and I was like, huh? He says, I'm gonna bring somebody out here that's good. And then you'll have something to aspire to. You guys are gonna play double bass for a couple of weeks. And I'm going like, what can they bring? You know, they bought Jeff Berlin. And I was like, okay. So I had a whole nother perspective. And then right after that, I got to watch Brian Bromberg play with Billy Cobham. You know, ridiculous. Both of them ridiculous bass players. Super ridiculous. So then, you know, the walls appear. So my discipline, you know, I know how good I am. I can fool people some of the time, right? But I know I know what a wall is, you know, and I love looking at those guys, but I know what I have to offer. So I try to refine what I have to offer even today.
That's a, you know what, that's a great lesson for anybody. You can always be better. You know, doesn't matter what you are, you can always improve. Whether you're a photographer, as myself, a bass player, a singer,
Right.
you know, you can always be better. And there's always people you look up to. And I have photographers I look up to. And you know, that's part of life. And one other thing, you only have one life to live. Do what you want to do. Don't take the road to. I tell people this all the time. Take the road to the left, because you never know what you're going to find. And I took the road to the left years ago. You started out on the road to the left, and you know, we're not like everybody else. We're different. We walk a different path and we think differently. But you're doing what you want to do in your life, and just knowing you, the few times that I've met you and talking to you, you're at one happy cat, man. You love what you do, and it just shows just by talking. You get excited talking about your dad.
Oh yeah, man. Hey man, that guy, man, he showed me so much stuff, man. And we had stuff that we would do on stage. I look across at him, and only me and him knew to look. You know, only me and him. I'd look at him, I go like, man, that is so crazy. And you know, he made me grow up a lot. You know what I mean? And you know, I probably grew up before my time, and you know, I probably would have settled down in life a lot more if you know, if I didn't have some of his traits. You know.
And your dad gave you a kick in the ass when you needed it, right?
Oh yeah, he wasn't shy about that. He wasn't shy about that. You know, I remember I was all excited when I got the gig with David Crosby. I said, I'm playing with David Crosby. And he's like, oh, Lord.
He knew.
Oh,
he
no.
knew.
He's like going, oh, no. You know what I mean? And you know, I was there when Crosby got busted in Texas, you know, and, you know, that was something. David Crosby, that was quite an experience, man. But you know, I survived, and you know, I'm here to talk about it. You
and
know,
I'm glad you are, man.
I'm playing great music. You know what I mean? That's what the cool thing is. I'm playing great music, and you know I'm playing great music, and I'm around some really great musicians, and you know, I could play with LA's finest. And there was a time when I was nervous about doing that. I remember I would go to LA, get off the plane, and you know, as you leave the airport and you drive over that hill on La Cienega, and you see the Hollywood sign, I'd go, okay, I'm gonna tackle it this time. I never could until I'd say the last 7 years. Now I'm cool.
Brother, you've made it. This is Tony Saunders. I've really enjoyed our chat. We're going to do this again soon. We're going to we'll get Nils to get in here and have a three-way and really get some stories told about what's going on. Tony, I really appreciate this. He is Tony Saunders. Check out his new album, Sexy Something. Actually, it's a CD. Why the hell do we keep saying albums? I mean, that shows you how old we are.
That's what we are. We're album people. I tell people, what is that song on my record? And they go, record?
Tony, you and I are going to get together soon and have a beer. I appreciate it, brother. And we will talk to you soon.
All right, man. Bless you, man. This has been really fun.
Thanks, Tony.
Okay, have a spectacular day.
You too, brother.